But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 294. Who do they think we are? I think I might have used this title once before, but hope not. Anyway, if I did, it'll change so that we're not duplicating. But, or if I find that I did anyway. But that said, I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And tonight we're going to look at an article that purports to answer that very question. But before we find out, we gotta do what we gotta do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. If you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, we are apparently all things boogeyman. And when I first read this article, looking for things to discuss in the interim while I'm prepping for the next dive into the cesspool that is Michael Flood. I'm looking at this going, my dad used to have a joke about a plot device NPC character from a cartoon that was ripped from a comic strip, a newspaper comic strip, or for the Europeans, the funnies, that you could do anything with it, called the Schmoo. And in the original Lil Abner comics, it wasn't quite, if I understand right, it wasn't quite as versatile as in the cartoon. The cartoon was called The New Schmoo, and it only ran for like a year. And I've seen the opener a gazillion times, but not watched the cartoon much. So, but you could turn it into anything. It was just this weird character that was the substance was as light as air, and in the original comic strip, it would turn itself into food, or it would produce food, and it created a crisis, an economic crisis that had to be solved because people could get food for free, so they wouldn't have to work for it, right? And so there was some social commentary about it and some political commentary about it for a long time. But in any case, it was a do-all, be-all, exist-all thing. And we seem to be kind of that way, except from a wrong
difficult
point
to find.
boogeyman standpoint.
It's difficult to think of a modern analog of that, because nowadays everything is a Schmoo.
Yeah.
Everything can be whatever we say it is, because reality is whatever we say it is.
Yeah.
When I say we, I don't mean we. I mean the Uniparty. You get it.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing is, once postmodernism took hold in the public sphere discussion, it became this thing that reality doesn't exist. So I guarantee you, reality exists. And there are some concepts that are not, they're immutable. Like you might be able to redefine, trends. You might be able to redefine, I don't know, uses of things that exist already and stuff, but you cannot change what something is by describing it differently. There's not a guarantee that you can do that. And I really, as I've said before, preface this with disclaimer, this is a joke, guys, don't do it. But if you really believe that you can change what things are by redefining them, by changing how you describe them, I invite you to go to a top of a tall building and test that out with gravity. Describe it in somewhat other way, and then see what happens if you throw something off, or try testing it with your own butt. Obviously don't, because you know what's going to happen, and you know what's going to happen because actually describing something differently doesn't change what it is.
Would that it were, but people will happily accept any form of eugenic jab and then go, well, this is what we say it is. We call it a but it doesn't matter that it doesn't actually vaccinate you against anything. We say it's a and therefore it is one. And again, would that it were so simple that everything is whatever we say it is. A lot of people will say, if someone identifies as a woman, then they are a woman. That's all that matters. And if you say, well, I disagree, they will say, well, you're a transphobe. And the correct response to that is, but I don't identify as a transphobe.
There you go.
And then you'll find out that it's not everything. It's no, you are a transphobe because that's a literal description of what you're doing. You're a transphobe. And well, how is a woman not a literal description of a physical thing? And it's not even that anything is what we say it is that the abstract is concrete and the concrete is abstract. And it's not even as simple as that. It's literally reality is whatever we say it is. Who do I mean by we? I mean the Uniparty. What do I mean by the Uniparty? Well, you have to be as deep into this bullshit as we are to figure that out. It's it's the powers that be, it's the elites, and even left wing is a reductive description of it. That's why I keep calling it oikophobia, because that to me seems to be the end of the road. It's whatever is familiar, we will throw into the ether of this Gnostic postmodernism, and whatever is traditional, we will throw every weapon we have at it to destroy it.
Yep.
Let's get on with the article. I'm rambling.
Well, and I will point this out too. Case in point, in regards to us being all things, to people who consider themselves left wing and who consider right wing to be a synonym for the army of the devil. The devil they don't like, not the one that they want to put altars to in courthouses because, separation of church and state or whatever. But they call us the pipeline to the right wing, right? But if you talk to anti-MRA right-wingers, our detractors on the right, certain types of people who refer to themselves now as red pillars, but don't realize that the term was already in use and already had a connotation in regard to gender politics before they started. They consider us leftists, and oddly enough, some pickup artists and dating coaches that have the "here's how to get girls" grift call due process advocates feminists, which is hilarious given that most attacks on men's due process rights originated with feminist lobbying. So we've come full circle. We really are everything. We are everything to all people, but
Feels powerful.
nothing that is real.
I like
yeah,
that.
we are omnipotent. We are such powerful.
No, it's tempting to say that if the left and the right both disagree with you, that must mean that what you're doing is correct. But no, the left and the right both disagree with flat earthers.
Yeah.
But they also both disagree with MRAs. It can mean you're in the right, and it can mean you're in the wrong. Nothing's quite as simple as that. You have to delve into the details of these things, and that's. And that is when both sides of any given binary will strawman you into oblivion. Sorry, folks, nothing's simple. You need to get into the weeds. You need to excavate rather than just put things in a museum.
Although they do not call flat earthers a threat because everybody laughs at them. Right? They treat us like a threat. We scary. But
Booga booga.
I'm the boogeyman. Booga booga booga. Yeah, I'm gonna come out from under their beds in the middle of the night.
And I'm not even getting out of my bed in the middle of the night.
Oh, I'm up in the middle of the night, man. That is when I am awake. But I can't do anything lately. So, all right. So the article is titled "Manosphere Madness: YouTube's anti-feminist pipeline recruiting youth into the right wing." And I am going to make fun of this, but I'm also going to tell you why we had to take it seriously enough to actually do an episode on this. So when I saw this article, and this is this is I think an Indian publication, although the people who are involved in it are not all Indian. Somewhere on here it had their about, and it's not on the list now. It's not giving me the option to go to their about page now. But in their about page, they listed that they were award-winning in several ways, and at least one of their writers is a Nobel Peace Prize winner or Nobel something else prize winner. And it might not have been the Peace Prize, but it was a Nobel Prize. And so that tells you that these are establishment drones, not just some group of dumbasses with a blog. And this is a non-profit organization. It's not just a business. They have some sort of affiliation, government approval for this actual website, because it's not just a .com, it's a .org, and not everybody gets to be a .org. So while we are going to make fun of this and how wrong they've gotten things, just bear in mind this article is an establishment narrative, not just bunch of dumbasses that don't know what they're talking about. It is a bunch of people who probably know damn well that what they're saying is not honest and not a valid presentation per se. and they're trying to promote this narrative for a purpose. So have some thoughts maybe about what that purpose might be. But let's go ahead and dive in. There we go. So you can see it and I can see it. It is hard to scroll through YouTube and not be bombarded with videos and recommendations that push a right-wing agenda.
I'm sorry, what? How high are you?
Like the first sentence, I knew that was how that was going to hit too.
like maybe 15 years ago, before they initiated the algorithm to destroy anything that looks vaguely right-wing, and especially anything that looks vaguely MRA. Fucking, have you seen Vosh's channel? He admits that he's lying. He's fucking delighted about how much he lies. He's like, I will tell any lie it takes to advance socialism. And YouTube's like, well, let's shove him up the fucking front page. And fucking ContraPoints does one video a year. And he gets, and yes, I will say he gets fucking millions of views, despite the fact that he's talking obvious nonsense. Anyone who hasn't got their ostrich head buried in several layers of igneous rock knows at this point that YouTube pushes left-wing content forward no matter how obviously bullshit it is, and pulls any right-wing content back. But I guess we can't prove it, so yeah, conspiracy theorist. Yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, I think the higher ups at YouTube are very much biased in favor of the left wing.
Yeah.
Can I prove it? No, but I can point at numbers, and you'll just say, "Well, those numbers are things that just happen organically." Because fuck you, fuck all of you. Ugh.
I actually, you know how when you go to your recommendations and stuff, and just look at what comes up on the page, you know, it's going to pick from your subscriptions, and then it's also going to offer you recommendations from outside of your prescriptions or your subscriptions, and you as you use the site often enough, you know, you'll get recommendations that are more and more tailored toward your viewing habits, except in the tab where it recommends news sources. And then you get recommendations for videos from CNN and MSNBC and, you know, the like, if you're from the United States, and probably places like the BBC and that if you're from the UK, and you know, probably left-wing news sources in every country. And you don't see recommendations for any news sources that are not explicitly left-wing. And then there are news sources that are not explicitly establishment also don't show up. So I went through, and you can actually click and tell YouTube to not recommend certain channels to you. And I did that with all of the explicitly left-wing establishment news media to see if it would continue to recommend, you know, news media to me. And then it started recommending all Fox News. Just Fox News, not anything else. There are dozens of things that could have been recommended, but only Fox News came up because Fox News is, after all of this time, establishment right-wing news. And so I asked it not to
comparatively right-wing news.
Yeah, it's comparatively, yeah, to the left wing. And
since they lost Tucker Carlson,
they've kind of taken a dive.
They might as well be just left to center. And I sure as fuck haven't even glanced at their channel since they got rid of Tucker, because fuck it, who the fuck is left?
Although if I'm in a bad mood, I will look up Shannon Bream, just because she just has this sweet presentation. I don't have to listen to what she's saying. It's just like having the nice girl that you grew up with have a chat with you. So there you go. But you know, she's probably the only person I think I'd watch. Maybe Gutfeld if I was gonna, but I don't, because he's funny, fellow smartass, right? But I don't have I used to have the television on at night to keep track of time, and I don't do that anymore. I have an alarm. And sorry for sniffling at you guys. My nose just went ballistic for no reason. But in any case, yeah, I really haven't paid much attention to what's on Fox News either. But what I did was I went through and told it not to recommend Fox News to me. And it stopped recommending news. Like, I had to look up other news channels and like some of the videos on those news channels before I even started getting recommendations for them.
Wow.
And it's, I had to go through and, like, I find Newsmax kind of interesting. I don't really watch news presenters, news anchors giving the news, but sometimes I will watch. Sometimes I will watch, them at least, because they're at least going to give me information that I'm not gonna get from some other news sources. But it's easier to read between the lines if you read the news. You don't have somebody fast talking it to you, So, but yeah, it's part of it is what's pushed to the front, which is definitely not right-wing stuff. But a large part of it is, once I started doing that, it changed what my recommendations were. And so for them to get bombarded with videos and recommendations that push a right-wing agenda, they have to have been watching those videos on a regular. And then eventually, like, I watch, when I come home from work, if I'm stressed, I listen to creepypasta readers, because there are some creepypasta readers that have very soothing voices, and it puts me to sleep. I never get to hear the ends of the stories.
Like Mr. Bolin.
Yeah, well, that one, a lot of the stuff that he talks about is already familiar to me, so that's no problem. But I mean, like, actual creepypasta, not just old stories about strange, dark, and mysterious things that have really happened, but like creepypasta fiction. Like...
Oh, Bolin does that. He occasionally does a story about some paranormal shit, and I'm like,
yeah,
please don't
yeah.
do that. It just makes me doubt all the other possibly true stories that you do.
Well, it's interesting. He'll do, but he won't do it as like, there's creepypasta, and then there's like creepypasta. There's some of the Reddit subreddits that people post in, questions. Have you ever seen something, like a cryptid or whatever, and people will answer and tell their stories. But then there's creepypasta like in Reddit's No Sleep, where it's intended to, the pretense is that it's a real and true story, but you know that it's not, right? And different things in there people have read. And there's even story series, and of course, there's some creepypasta that's been made into actual TV series, although not for regular television mostly. But yeah, so that kind of thing, and I like to just nod off, and it's not like it's going to give me nightmares. I already have those, so. In fact, nothing I've heard in creepypasta is all that scary because of that. It's actually kind of difficult to scare me with stuff like that. But in any case, because of that,
articles like this that scare the fuck out of me.
Because of that, when I open YouTube, half my feed is creepypasta readers, because I listen to that a lot. It's dominated by that and, like the Reddit question and answer readers. God, I can't think of the guy's name now. It's really bad. But the Reddit Aliens channel, like that guy also has a voice that can help you get to sleep. So he's actually about Gen X age, so probably experienced reading to kids at night reader. But in any case, that's what controls your YouTube feed. So they're probably bitching about something they did to themselves. Because YouTube doesn't automatically promote that stuff. But if you go looking for it, and you look and continue to watch it, and continue to seek it out, and continue, you get more recommendations for it, because YouTube is like, oh, this is what they like, so here, have some more. And this is similar. This uses similar keywords in its descriptor. So here's some more of that. And so if they are constantly looking for things that we should start putting right wing in our keywords, because that might actually get people who hate watch right wing content to watch our stuff. But yeah, so she goes on. I think it's whether it's she or he. I don't know. I can't tell by that name. It's really bad.
Arjun. I think it's a male.
That's a male. I think you're right. So he is making this claim that that you get bombarded, but he probably hate watches a lot of right wing content, or a lot of content that he thinks of as right wing, and that's an important distinction, because they think it's right wing to argue for equal treatment under the law if you're saying that men should receive it. So, I mean, that's kind of crazy. You're arguing for equal treatment under the law for women, okay. But if you're arguing for the same for men, like say everything that men are given or women are given under the law, men should also have, then you're left wing somehow. Or you're right wing somehow.
That's what equal means. Some pigs are more equal. No, pigs are more equal. No, some pigs are more equal.
Some animals are more equal than others, and it's the pigs.
Sows are more equal than boars.
Yeah. And apparently they think we're boars. So, this is something that a lot of people online have observed, he says. And right-wing talking heads themselves have celebrated. And everybody, in my opinion, personally, this is me again, not the article, that has said that is a moron. Because, again, you only get that stuff promoted to you if you're already looking it up and watching it.
I mean, has it ever dawned on this guy that, or these people, that maybe, all these people are flocking to the right wing is because your fucking ideas are insane and unpopular? No. It's us. We're wrong. We're the bad guys because you're the people who you want to be preaching to are now coming over to the dark side. Well, how about get a better message, assholes?
Stop doing the wrong thing, Boogie. The wrong thing, Boogeyman will not darken your doorstep.
Right, and how about you stop calling your fucking political opposition all racist and bigots and sexist and shit? How about you actually take time to get to know them? Maybe that's why they don't want to be on your fucking left wing, under your left wing fucking umbrella of whatever the fuck flavor it is of the month that you feel like you have to celebrate today.
Yeah.
Just get out of here. It's unpopular. I mean, come on. You can't blame a person for not liking your idea.
But
you suck.
But you are infected with phobias and isms. You are infected. It's bad. Bad.
Yeah, well, their heads are full of holes and their poop is full of worms. I don't no care in the world about what these people think. It's just fuck you.
The phobias and the isms are gonna kill us all.
It's not even that there's more of a right-wing proclivity on the internet. It's just that it's disproportional to the mainstream media, because people who are on board with these left-wing messages that are nothing but left-wing are quite happy watching TV. And I know a lot of us terminally online people are sort of stuck in our bubble where we only listen to right-wing things, and a lot of us forget how many people are out there still getting all their news from the television or from the newspapers, where all they get is this left-wing message of everyone in our country is racist, everyone in our country is sexist, and everyone in all those other countries that are flooding into ours, they're the good people. Fucking foreigners are great, and anyone who Anyone who's in favor of our own country is an evil, racist tyrant and stuff.
Yeah.
And yet, let us not forget how many millions of people, if not the vast majority of people, are still just watching TV, and they're perfectly fine with hearing these left-wing messages. The people who are sick of this stuff and start to doubt it, or just the people who go online because they like having entertainment and news on demand, they're able to hear a wide variety of messages that aren't regulated by. In Britain, it's Ofcom. Just everything on TV, every single TV channel is regulated by Ofcom, and Ofcom is regulated by the government, and the government hates the people it's supposed to be serving. That's inevitably what happens in every government.
And it's regulated by feminists.
Yeah, it's
who hate men.
Feminism is another kind of oikophobia. It's the original kind of oikophobia, as I've attempted to get across. So it's just that. Well, if anything, it's that the internet is more occupied by centrists, or people who are looking for multiple sides of any given story, whereas the people who watch the TV and read the newspapers are accustomed only to the left side of any given agenda, and they think that is centrism. They get pushed to the left like that meme where I stayed the same and the left went further and further left. Well, that's just because mainstream media like the TV and the newspapers have pushed them left and left, and when they're still under the delusion that they're in the center. No, you're not, and you can see this because when you go on the internet, you're able to find any kind of messaging you want, and therein you're able to find anything to the right of Stalin, and so. Yeah, the people who work for the mainstream media are like, well, everything on the internet is right wing. Everything. You can't find any left wing talking heads anywhere on the internet. We need to crack down on the internet until we control everything, and they already do control almost everything on YouTube. They've been trying to recreate YouTube in the image of the mainstream media for years now, and they've succeeded, but it's never good enough. Like I was saying on Tuesday. The left wing will never take a win as a win. No matter how many wins they get, they will keep acting as though they're still losing. So they keep cracking down further and further on anyone who likes their own country or likes their own culture. And so it keeps getting worse and worse.
Oh yeah, and what we end up seeing then is there's this dialogue as if there is left-wing, right-wing, and centrism, and if you're not centrist, you must be left or right, and if somebody doesn't like your opinion, whichever one they think they are, you must be on the other side, and then if they really don't like your opinion, you're an extremist. And it doesn't matter why they don't like your opinion. It doesn't matter if their opinion that they would prefer you share instead of having your own is extreme in and of itself. You're still the extremist because it's their perspective, right? They are the main character. But I would argue that a lot of men's rights issues, I guess if you wanted to say we had an agenda, a lot of what we think about, talk about, and advocate for is more, instead of leftism, rightism, or centrism, it's externalism. We look at this from the outside of all of it, and the correct solution isn't necessarily something in between what is advocated for by either the authoritarian left or the authoritarian right or anywhere along the spectrum of libertarianism. It's not necessarily above or below the fray, but just completely outside the sphere of politics. And it goes right back to the underlying question that all of your politics are based on. what are the rights of the individual? What are the rights of the greater community as a unit? And how do we draw boundaries between those rights and the autonomy of the individual, the authority of the community as a unit, which usually is wielded as in the form of a state, a government, and how do we protect the individual from abuse by the greater numbers? In other words, how do we protect the individual from abuses by democracy, abuses by communism, or abuses by any other collective system? And when you look at it from the perspective of recognizing that's what we're talking about in politics, entirely, all politics boils down to that, one way or another. It stops being about whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white, whether you're up or down. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether you have freckles, whether gingers have souls, whether your chewing gum loses its flavor on the bedpost overnight. It matters whether you're human. And every individual Homo sapien is human. And every human should have the same basic human rights. And from there, you have to talk about the starting point, not equality of outcome. And it becomes a lot easier to understand that from the outside standpoint of that description. People individually versus people collective. And where's the boundary, and where's the autonomy, where are the rights? Of course, it's hard for people to only look at it that way when they want a victim narrative, and their basis for whether someone deserves consideration is whether or not they are a victim of their circumstances or a victim of their experiences. It becomes difficult then, the issue becomes clouded, and you end up looking at equality of outcome and coming up with excuses to infringe on this demographic's starting point rights or that demographic's starting point rights because, obviously, victimhood versus the other concept, privilege. And that's where these guys get scared when they see someone like us talking about it from the standpoint of the individual right versus the collective right, and recognizing that human beings deserve to be treated from their starting point, equally. And they're going to be scared because if you convince people, if you get people to understand that there isn't a demographic of human beings that deserves to be treated as less human, no matter what victimhood any other group claims, no matter whether you like them or not, no matter how alien their way of thinking might be to your demographic's way of thinking and so on, then all of a sudden, most of how these groups use government to infringe upon individual human rights becomes exposed as a forms of abuse, and that destroys their whole grift. So they're terrified.
I'm gonna say it. Even communists are humans who deserve to be heard. Oh, I throw up in my mouth just now, but I have to say it. I have to, just for the sake of the principle we're trying to get across.
Yeah. Going on though. So this guy claims this is something a lot of people online have observed, and like I said, if they're observing this, they're observing it through confirmation bias. But the spread of right-wing sentiments, he says, is not limited to video creators, but also exists in the wider YouTube community, something which can often be seen in comment sections. YouTube and social media in general have come under the glare for the kind of content that is recommended to users, and the effects that this has on offline or real-world individuals and communities. I started off by talking about YouTube because it is the world's largest video hosting platform so far. I'm adding this so far, obviously, and a place where people from a variety of backgrounds come together across many intersecting interests.
It's worth pointing out that real world was put in scare quotes.
I know. I think that's
real world. What?
Yeah, the internet's the real world now, guys. Sorry. If you've been like going to work at a job in the physical realm where your body is, sucks to be you. No, I do that every night, so there we go. Yeah, and what bugs me about this description here is what's this guy doing? Right? He's not just complaining. He's not just describing a circumstance and lamenting it. He's lamenting that his political perspective does not have control over what he views as a large and influential platform. And he's complaining that the majority of people on that platform have different opinions than he has, right? And that shouldn't be allowed to stand in his view. And people shouldn't be allowed to talk like that, or if they do, nobody should hear them.
Insane.
Yeah. And here's where he's gonna sort of cement that, I guess. YouTube, therefore, has a very broad and generalized audience, and the dominance of reactionary content on the platform means that such views have the potential to reach even those who may not consider themselves actively political, nor have much of an interest or knowledge about contentious social and political subjects of the day. People might hear your ideas. That's his fear. His fear is that people might hear ideas about men being human.
What exactly does he think that YouTube is for? I mean, yes, people have ideas. They go to YouTube to express those ideas, and maybe they might want some feedback from people. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Why is he acting like this is some kind of alien, like, oh my God, look at what people are doing, or what? Where do you live? What?
Yeah.
It's called YouTube for a reason. That's how it was advertised. It's not us doing this. It's you.
You.
but they quickly sort of backtracked on that. No, not you. we just mean them. By that I mean us. Just not you. All right.
Yeah. So he goes on. While progressive left of center and left-wing positions, a socialist, Marxist, anarchist, etc., struggle. I bet he hasn't heard of anarcho-capitalism because he wouldn't call that left-wing. Struggle to reach the masses due to the accrued resistance of social norms. That's interesting. Ingrained education and lack of resources, the well-funded right-wing propaganda machine can muscle its way to the top of algorithmic recommendations and insulate its potential recruits against discourses that advocate for changing the status quo, misdirecting them down a path which has often been labeled as a far-right rabbit hole.
So not rabbits either. Rabbits don't count as you.
No, but what did he just say there? He just said, my political ideas are the correct political ideas, and nobody's watching them, and I blame the algorithm for promoting the things that I hate watch, and people will accept those ideas because they're stupid, and then they won't accept mine. That's basically his outlook. This is what we are dealing with when you see these guys try to control like the authoritarian, progressive, collectivist outlook, I guess you could say. The folks that basically want to erase the boundary between the authority of the state and your personal autonomy, such that the state can override entirely your personal autonomy. Yeah, this is how they think.
But you know what, Hannah? In a sense, he's not really wrong. I mean, if anyone with a brain comes in and watches, content on this side of the aisle, yeah, no, they don't. They're not gonna listen to the bullshit that's coming out of your mouth, buddy.
Yeah, but it's not
They're
because
lost.
they're stupid. It's because
Right.
when we describe life experiences and the issues that are created by authoritarian micromanagement in law and policy, like social micromanagement, we're describing life experiences that people are familiar with because they're happening in their lives, right? And that is what scares these people. So, yeah, he goes on.
They're not scared, by the way.
No, they're not.
This article is barely a month old. Now you'd think they'd be talking about Rumble, because Rumble is rapidly growing in popularity, largely for the very reasons already outlined in this article. But they're not mentioning Rumble because they don't want to give it any traffic. They're still talking about YouTube as though it's 10 years ago and it hadn't already been skewed massively and almost uncontroversially in favor of left-wing feminist ideas. But they're still pushing on this because they know YouTube is still orders of magnitude more popular than Rumble or BitChute. They're never going to complain about BitChute because they're very confident that BitChute is still very much in the weeds of obscurity, so they don't feel at all threatened by BitChute.
Yeah.
And I think they're beginning to be threatened by Rumble, but they're still diverting all of that scaremongering onto YouTube, just to make extra sure, just to push everyone further in the direction of banning all right-wing content or anything that's not extreme authoritarian left content from YouTube, because they still haven't done it enough for all their efforts to marginalize anyone who's at all in favor of men's rights or the rights of anyone that communists don't like. They're still kind of pushing to make YouTube even more communist than it already is.
Yeah. Yep. What we're seeing, and I've noticed this. Like I saw this early on in on Reddit. Actually, saw this even going clear back to. I'm gonna boomer for a minute here. Going back to MySpace, right, where you saw. Mostly, it was just people sending GIF files to their friends, glittery GIF files to their friends and stuff. But if you ever said anything political, and you actually got a discussion going, you would notice that people of the authoritarian collectivist ideologies would discuss politics as if their ideas were the correct way of thinking, and anybody who didn't agree with them was bad. That you're bad, you have isms and phobias, you are predatory, you are selfish, and so on. How dare you not want to give up all of your autonomy for the greater good of people who don't want to work, or whatever. That's selfish, very selfish of you. You should be doing work for you and them. and so on. But it didn't even start there. And if you go back further to um, forums that existed prior to social media, bulletin board systems, and the like, um, different types of news nets and stuff, you would see the same thing happening in politics. And in fact, political discussion on message boards of different types was a lot of times discouraged because moderators could not control the slap fights, and they would get mad that people were expressing political opinions they disagreed with and then getting bullied for it, and would, they would have to moderate the bullying, and if you answered back to the bullying, you got labeled the bully. Somebody would tell you to go not eat a bag of dicks, but go fuck yourself or something along those means, and you'd go back and say, well, you're being very rude. What the heck is wrong with you? Can't you consider the issue, or are you 3 years old? And the moderator would come along, and if you can't talk to this person without comparing them to a 3-year-old, like, sorry, but they just responded to this group of people is as human as that group of people with, go fuck yourself. I don't think that I'm wrong in comparing that to being a 3-year-old. Besides the fact that you don't want 3-year-olds saying fuck. And even before then, you go back to the old pre World Wide Web dial up direct dial, where you can only get on this bulletin board system if you know the address, and you actually have to type that in. You didn't have a web page to go to, and those arguments were still the same. And I have never at any point in my life had an argument with a hardline leftist without being treated as if anything that I say is the evil. I am expressing the views of the devil. It's heresy, and I should be burned at the stake. Whether it's on a topic of women's issues, whether it's on the topic of religious issues, whether it's on the topic of individual rights, and your right to bear arms, your speech rights, your due process rights, any of that. If their arguments are coming from the authoritarian collectivist standpoint, talking about individual rights is heresy. And I haven't had that with right-wingers where, I talk about issues involving the right to not be responsible for somebody else's choices. And in particular, the right of men to not be responsible for women's choices. The right of men to not just be beasts of burden for society, but to actually be treated as human beings. The right gets a little bit Haiti about that because they think it challenges traditional norms, and traditional norms in particular on which society is built. But they don't treat me like that. They do treat me like it's part of a greater collectivist political perspective. But they don't seem to have this idea that I'm evil for believing these things or have phobias or isms. It's more about, well, you just don't understand the way things work. Except I do. But it's, like I said, it's not quite as... They don't treat me like the devil. They treat me, at worst, like a dumbass. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And if only it were quite as simple as this division of individual and collective rights. I mean, these same left-wing goofballs will talk about the individual rights of the child,
right,
to consent to all sorts of things like sexual activity, or the individual right of the child to change their quote-unquote gender. That's where they were flipped right to the other side and say, No, the individual rights of every child should be respected, even though it's clearly their feminist mother who is coercing them into changing their gender because it's trendy, and frankly because they get off on it sexually. That's a whole other subject.
Yes, you have the individual right to do what they tell you to do and to experience what they impose on you. That's actually kind of it's why the right calls them groomers, because it is gaslighting when you attribute agency where there is no agency and then claim the individual has the right or responsibility that goes along with that non-existent agency that you have attributed.
And even the idea of collectivism, they only believe in beyond a certain threshold. Because let's not forget, nationalism is a form of collectivism,
True.
and globalism is a greater form of collectivism. Leftists are very much against nationalism, as long as it's your own country's collectivism. They're perfectly fine with foreign nations having a sense of collectivism as they invade your country.
Oh yeah,
and they're very much that globalism is very much the form of collectivism that they will push to the expense of everything else. So it really isn't as simple as right wing is individualistic and left wing is collectivistic. No, there's boundaries in both of these places. I think collectivism is not without its merits. I think the furthest point at which collectivism is useful is nationalism, having a sense of, dare I say it, identity that extends to the borders of your own country. And yes, that is collectivism. I'm absolutely in favor of individualism within that collective, but as long as there is competition, this is the whole point of having individual countries. If you don't like the policies in place in your own country, then you should be free to move to a different country. This is the whole point of competition. If you don't like one thing, you can move on to another thing. So collectivism is fine as long as you have options.
yeah.
Globalism is collectivism where you don't have any options. Where this is just one world government and you just have to live with it, whether you like it or not. And that's the point at which I say no.
The sad thing is we've run out of places to have the option of going out and making your own country with blackjack and hookers. But in any case, in terms of the whole collectivist and individualist thing, I would say I wouldn't even have a problem with collectivism if it wasn't authoritarian, right? And that's where globalism is the authoritarian form of collectivism. And when nationalism becomes authoritarian rather than the cohesion being based on cultural, as form of cultural intimacy and cultural pride, then it becomes dangerous. Like if you have a culture that wants to show the world, look what we can give to the world and be in the world as a good in the world. That kind of national pride is great. You know, look, we have this is a great place to be. Come here and enjoy it. Visit us. You know, spend your money here, and so on. And you know, yes, we'll help when things are going wrong, and yes, we'll because we're wealthy because we've made a great place. That's good nationalism. That's healthy nationalism. Yes, we're proud of what we have built. Unhealthy is everybody else needs to be just like us or you're all wrong. And that gives us the right to send our tanks and our guns into your country and change your politics. And it doesn't matter whether we're doing it because we dislike your politics or because half or more of your people have begged us because they're being victimized by authoritarians, right? It's just our right to do that. Like that's unhealthy nationalism. And unfortunately, at some point, the United States flipped from we've created something we can be proud of to everybody has to be like us or we're going to invade. And we're not even calling it invading. It's we're rescuing you. That's it. You didn't know you were in distress, but we're going to rescue you anyway. And that is scary, and unfortunately, that really blurs the line between left and right wing because it was largely right wing ideals that were being used to convince the public that we hadn't flipped like that we were rescuing people in distress, and what we were doing in terms of military action in the world was always good and necessary and in the interest of the people of the United States. And it hasn't been for decades. So, yeah, the lines can be very blurred. And of course, it always seems to be at the expense of men. So he goes on to start describing the actual manosphere, right? One of the most common types of right-wing and conservative content on YouTube promotes the agenda of the manosphere. Right? The manosphere has all one agenda now, guys.
Yes.
Pickup artists and MGTOWs are going to be looking at each other going, dating coaches and MGTOWs, nope. Anyway, a loose collection of related ideologies that are anti-feminist and patriarchal at their core. The YouTube manosphere includes the following trends. And first in line is red pill culture, derived from a scene from the famous movie The Matrix. Red pill ideology posits waking up to the reality of gender relations and how they are unfavorably tilted against men. It plays upon the central plot device of the film in which humans awaken from a simulated life into the reality of being plugged into the Matrix.
If I can, it's not concluding that society is tilted against men. It's rejecting the long-held, widespread notion that it's tilted against women. That's the blue pill that we've been fed for the last couple of centuries. That the society is tilted against women. That's what the red pill means to me. It means undoing yourself of this notion that women are oppressed by men, and that doesn't mean men are oppressed by women. It just means women are not oppressed by men. But these black and white thinkers, or rather these red and blue thinkers, can't get their head around that because they display this what I would dare to call a conspiratorial mindset that if you don't believe in our conspiracy theory, then you can only possibly believe in the equal and opposite conspiracy theory. No, we just don't believe in your conspiracy theory. And yes, it is a conspiracy theory. Every description I've ever heard from feminists of this idea that women are oppressed by men, they try to say, well, it's not that men are complicit in this oppression. It's just that it's just that they're complicit in it. Every man oppresses every woman.
I'm not saying it's patriarchy, but it's patriarchy.
And we have to push it back in the other direction to make sure that they don't do this. Yeah.
And of course you have because women are victims, it's okay to infringe upon what would normally be considered standard human rights if the people affected by that infringement are men. But we're not violating their rights because they have privilege. Like, that's the logic. Yeah. Got to address this. Derek Workman says, this is confusing, Hannah. America became interventionist after World War II. There is one thing we can still say about it that we should all be proud of. America's entry into World War I was interventionist. Like, there was barely any truth to the reasons that they, gave for entering. Not that the events didn't happen, but that they were actually a reason for us to go to war. And the conditions that created World War II would not have existed had it not been for the imbalance upon which the punitive treaty after World War I was created. That treaty really, World War I was not as good guy bad guy imbalanced as that treaty made it out to be, and made Germany out to be. And as a result, that created sympathies and resentments and economic circumstances that really screwed the whole system, screwed everything up. And as a result, people actually were vulnerable to the ideas of the Nazis. And so it's when we say America became interventionist after World War II for good reasons, it's kind of like I'd have to make the Batman comparison again. For reasons we thought were good, or our nation thought were good, our people thought were good, our politicians thought were good, we created our own enemies. And pretty much everything that's happened since then in terms of World War has been a result of the conditions created by the entry of the United States into World War I and the subsequent maneuverings that took place around World War II, where the fighting was, what deals were made, who was defeated, and what the result of that defeat was, and so on. Not just in terms of Germany, but throughout all of Europe. Like, if you really want to be fair about it, we pretended to go in and save the good guys, or at least the people who were on the side that didn't do things we called attacks in World War I. But actually what we did was go fuck Europe in the ass. That's, like, I really don't have a good opinion of this, I suppose. But the interventionism of the United States has gone on throughout the entire 20th century and into the 21st century.
We don't have the hindsight of what would have happened in World War I if America didn't get involved, because it was looking like it was a war that was going to go on forever, because it was never a war based on an invasion. It was a war based on European nations, that were much larger than they are now. Just it's sort of getting paranoid about each other, and like I once said, settling their disputes by building a trench across the east border of France and throwing men into it for as long as they could. And there's no telling how long it would have gone on for if America didn't come in and save the day, as they would have called it. Maybe it would have been another.
Ended just, and I would. There's a book about Woodrow Wilson and his the folly of his decision making and how it affected world politics since, that probably everybody should read. And off the top of my head, I can't think of the name. Wilson's War, how Woodrow Wilson something or another is the title of it. It's not. There's a movie called Wilson's War that came out around the same time that I learned about this book, that dominated searches online when I was looking for this book. So you at least have to if you're going to search for it, type in Wilson's War, how Wilson, and the rest of it'll come up. But the writer argues that World War I was already winding down when the U.S. entered, because the nations that were fighting it were running out of the money that they needed to continue the war, and they didn't have, like, they were running out of the support of the public. They were running out of people willing to fight, and a lot of men were getting killed. And that's the other thing. Europe does have a very long-standing history of nations bickering over borders and bickering over resources, bickering over ideological differences, and going to war, and lots of men being forced into war, and then they get killed. A lot of them get killed. And it's not just Europe. Every nation on every continent, every tribe, that's been human history. Like, throughout human history, political leaders, whether they have been of a dictator nature or of a trying to be benevolent nature, or at least trying to pretend to be benevolent, they've all done this. Right? It's not something that just was invented in the 20th century. It's just, and it's, the United States isn't the only nation that's ever been interventionalist either. It's just, we are at a point in political dialogue and name that I can't pronounce, JFFRYH, doesn't have any, is that Jeffrey? like from the Jeffrey, the Bill Cosby Jeffrey comedy sketch. No, not Charlie Wilson's War. It's Wilson's War, and it's about Woodrow Wilson. It is not Charlie Wilson's War. That's the one that dominated the searches when I was looking for the book. But yeah, we are at a point now where we know better. We understand, the public understands that when these narratives get promoted to us as to why another war is necessary, that we're being lied to, right? We're being conned. And that's something that should change the interventionism of the United States. That should change the outlook on the last century of warfare and the future of international politics. And we'll see if it does. There may be some very serious growing pains in the next generation. But I don't know. Like I said, we'll see if it does.
I'm struggling to think of any war that ended because both sides were like, we've killed so many men and we have no resolution. Let's just call a ceasefire and not have this war anymore. I don't. It doesn't seem to have happened ever. That there's never been anything stopping any nation from just continuing to throw men into that war, like every new generation of men, because nations don't care how many men they throw into the grinder. Like it's like what I was saying, because we don't know what would have happened if the war wasn't resolved. Maybe they would have kept throwing men into the meat grinder for another 100 years. They might do that in Ukraine.
If they could fund it, and
if they can conscript enough British and American men into the war,
yeah. If interventionism continues,
what's stopping them from just throwing every man in the Western world into this trench warfare or whatever it is now? Maybe they'll keep doing that, because at this point there's no one to come in, and there's no equivalent of Wilson's army to throw in and put an end to this. Obviously, it didn't work in the First World War, because when that happened in the First World War, Germany got fucked over in the Treaty of Versailles, and that didn't stop them from being scorned warmongers. And lo and behold, a Second World War happened 30 years later, or roughly. And yeah, it's I guess we'll never know. And it's largely it was because warfare became a very different beast at the beginning of the 1900s, because we had aircrafts and tanks,
Yeah.
and trench warfare. And I guess you might be able to predict a similar thing from what's happening in the current war, on the east boundary of what we currently call Europe. And yeah, the reason it's so hard to stop these wars is because it's very difficult to convince a country not to just throw men into the meat grinder. And I guess this is why we do what we do.
Yep.
Maybe there wouldn't be so many wars if there wasn't this constant incentive to just throw men into the meat grinder, because men don't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why authoritarians are terrified of us, actually. Because if society decides that it's not okay to just throw men into the meat grinder like that, they lose a huge level of power, right? The power to start violent conflicts with other nations and to interfere in other nations' politics is one of the greatest revenue streams for the elites, right? It's they a lot of their deals, like the things that have made the Nancy Pelosi's of the world insanely wealthy, are revolve around the regulation of your access to things and the government paying for things in order to fuel those conflicts. So basically conflict with you and conflict with other countries. And both of those involve throwing men into the meat grinder one way or another. And of course, if we kill the idea that it's just okay to throw men into the meat grinder, we kill those revenue streams. And then people cannot make themselves insanely rich by gaining political office, where in the levels of politics where the politicians have control over the regulation of your access to things and the payment for things that are used in war. And then they won't be able to invest in things that they have regulated or paid for, and they won't be able to make money that way. It's it's an interesting and rather disgusting situation and system, and it's being challenged in the United States right now. But I don't know how successful that challenge is going to be, because it's being challenged in among the people that are guilty of it, by a handful of people who are newbies in that system. So we'll see what happens to them. But as we go on, so red pill culture, that's the description of red pill culture, right? Then they go on. That's all they're going to say about red pill culture, right? He's only going to say that it plays upon that plot device, and that we think that gender relations are unfavorably tilted against men. The next thing is the Sigma cult. The Sigma cult is something I never heard of until feminists told me about it. Right? I knew that there was discussion about human beings as a species that has some similarity to I can't think of the term for a group of wolves.
As far as I know, it's a pushback.
Pack mentality.
Yeah, it's a pushback against the idea of this binary of alpha males and beta males.
Right. So
some people went, well, I'm neither alpha nor beta. I'm a fucking Capricorn. And yes, I say that.
Zeta is the term for neither.
Well, this is this is comparable to zodiac signs in a way, because it's just invented.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that it's invented around the stars or invented around some other thing. It's like, no, I'm not alpha or beta or zeta. I'm this other thing. I'm better than you. I'm better than both sides of this. And even if it does describe a literal thing, it's really not helpful, because it just feeds into identity politics.
Yeah.
Where identities are really not important. But yeah, go on.
Real quick, for people who are confused about the Wilson's War thing, Eric Brunner said in chat, yes, the book Hannah is mentioning is Wilson's War, how Woodrow Wilson's great blunder led to Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, and World War II. And that is correct. That's the book I'm talking about. And it is one that everybody should, even if you don't read the whole book, read the opening summary, and you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about. But yeah, in terms of this idea being a cult thing, it's feminists that sort of describe it this way. I don't think that there's actually a cult around this, because I had heard a little discussion here and there of MRAs and other men's issues commentators describing male and female behavior in terms of pack mentality versus herd mentality. And comparing us to different types of animals in the rest of the animal world, predators versus herd animals, prey animals, different types of like canines versus primates, and so on. And it's all about, I think, evolutionary psychology and how it has influenced culture. And it's all stuff that when you talk about that stuff, you take it all with a grain of salt, based on the idea that human beings, all of our instinct and all of our I don't know, all of our animalistic traits are confounded by our sapience. And having that sapience allows us to evaluate, analyze, and reject impulses. And the ability to evaluate, analyze, and reject impulses determines, more about us than what our impulses themselves do. Yeah, but it's offensive to people of the victim ideology mindset that you're not slave to your impulses. Because if you're not slave to your impulses, everything they do that harms other people for selfish reasons is willful, and they're culpable for it. And that would be, for them, the ultimate horror, right? So, Sigma male cult. And he says, the Sigma male is a supposed upgrade from the discredited notion of an alpha male. This imagined male archetype is stoic, contemptuous of women, and immune to their corrupting influence. Physically strong, rich, and a lone wolf figure with a clique of close confidants. This archetype has been inscribed onto figures from cinema like Christian Bale in his role as Patrick Bateman and Bruce Wayne, Cillian Murphy, Peaky Blinders, which I still want to see and haven't yet, and Oppenheimer, which I also still want to see and haven't yet, Tobey Maguire as Bully Maguire in Spider-Man 3, and more. The Sigma aesthetic is reinforced by certain set pieces of music and visual effects that add up to performances of unbothered masochism and charismatic masculinity. So I'm gathering that the Sigma male cult narrative is an objection to action heroes? Is that? Because, I've run into maybe one guy, and in all of Twitter, in all of my men's issues discussion, I've run into one guy that even remotely resembles this. And I wouldn't say that it's really that fitting. He's an asshole. But, Mr. Dating Coach doesn't quite fit this either. like I wouldn't apply this description to him exactly. Just, I could see a feminist doing it because I kind of know how they think. But is there anything like this really? Are there is there a group of men actually basing their ideas about masculinity on action heroes, and they really mean it?
I think
God, I hope not.
I think they're referring to MGTOWs in some way. Men who think they can get off the grid. And in some instances, it's possible for a man to just go into the woods and build his own shelter out of trees and stuff. And this is the archetype that a lot of MGTOWs like to imagine. And the vast majority of them are not capable of doing it. They just like to fantasize that they can get off the grid and live entirely off the land, and for the most part they can't. They just mock everyone who's not even trying to do that, even though they're not even trying to do that either.
No, the tough thing about getting off the grid is that the grid will chase you down, and
exactly.
Like, in the United States, for instance, there are municipalities and states where getting off the grid is outlawed. For instance, if you own a home and it's not fitted with hookups for utilities, you maybe have a wind turbine that serves your house, and you don't use so many appliances and devices that you need more electricity than it produces, and you heat with some sort of whether it's wood or coal or whatever, but you don't use electricity, you don't have gas line coming in, you don't use municipal water, you get your water from a source on your land, and you filter it yourself. They will come after you and condemn your home and take it, and they will not compensate you because it's your fault for failing to live the way they think you should. And there are municipalities and states with laws that allow them to do this. You have to be dependent and you have to pay for these things, or you're the bad guy. That's not every state. It's not every municipality, obviously. But because I know in Arizona there are people that go and live like on the edge of the desert in adobe huts and with no electricity, and so on. But yeah, this is a real thing, a real issue, and there's actually news stories about people who have been prosecuted for this or threatened with eviction from their own homes for this. You can find them easily with searches in Google, because the people who are doing the eviction are proud of what they're doing. They think they're doing the right thing, and they treat people who go off the grid like they're nuts. Right? They're dangerous to themselves and others, and something must be done about these crazy fuckers that don't do what they're told and don't live the way that they're expected to live.
You'll notice there's no female equivalent of this, dare I say, male power fantasy. Even the most extreme version of the female power fantasy is to get the government to give them everything they want, even without men contributing to that system. That's right. The extreme female power fantasy is communism. And they think it's gonna work, and we keep trying to tell them it's not gonna work, and they accuse us of being a Sigma male cult when we tell them it's not gonna work.
Real power, real female power has never been tried. The whole thing is quite sad, and honestly, I really don't think there's a last action hero cult, so but they're probably viewing it that way based on, it might be the going off the grid thing, it might just be because there is the among traditionalists. There is sort of a backlash against feminism's cry more narrative, which, they are right to backlash against that because feminists want men to cry without a purpose. And men don't do things without a purpose. It doesn't, that's just not how men work. Like, there's a whole subreddit for description of how women don't work like that. But women, if you tell them men don't work like that, they get upset. They don't understand. If men don't work like women, if men need there to be a reason, or if men need something to be more dramatically impacting to them than it needs to be to a woman in order to elicit tears, or if tears aren't the way a man expresses his pain, then women assume he's doing it wrong. But that backlash among traditionalists sort of has the Giga Chad meme and everything. A lot of it is tongue-in-cheek, really. And feminists don't have a sense of humor, so they don't understand that.
For what it's worth, I've cried for no particular reason many times in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't want sympathy for that. I'm just saying, it is something that happens, but it's something that I've never assumed I would get sympathy for. So it's something I do by myself, at home or in public toilets.
Yeah. And it's like, why the hell am I doing this? Or at least that's the way when I have that happen to me. I'm like, where'd this come from? Why is this happening? But I don't know. Maybe not everybody does that either. But the idea of men not crying, that this is just something that men never do. I learned that it was okay to cry about things that were not injurious to me when I was watching E.T. in theaters when it was a brand new movie, and there's the scene, where they're in all of the plastic, around, they're all sectioned off and everything, and there's the traumatic E.T. death scene, and the E.T. death scene concludes with everybody being all down, and Elliot is heartbroken and all this other stuff, and then you see the flowers bloom, and you realize E.T.'s not dead, and everything gets all emotional. And I was like trying to hold back tears in that moment because it's an emotionally overwhelming point in the movie. And like, God, this is embarrassing. Why am I crying about this? It's not happening to me. And I glanced up. I hope my dad's not noticing, because I'm being all whiny like a little kid. And tears are just streaming down his face. And I was like, you're allowed to have tears for compassion. Okay. It's like Hannah's little brain was fried for a minute there. Like, I get told not to cry about things that are not a big deal. And this is a movie. It's not a big deal. But, you're allowed to be emotionally overwhelmed by information that is emotionally overwhelming, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. To be stoic in that moment would be abnormal and unusual, right? The guy that's sitting in the theater grinning, or the woman that's giggling about it, like, they're expressing it differently, but they're still expressing it. The person that's stone-faced, though, you might be scared of that person. But you shouldn't be scared of different ways of expressing it, And there were different reactions in the theater that day. I still remember, like, part of the reason I was embarrassed about crying was because there were some people who covered for tears by giggling. So, yeah. Yes, men do cry. Feminists lie about that just like they lie about everything else. They just don't like it when men's tears are not in service to women. Like that story was about a boy and his buddy, from outer space, who happened to also be, I've always presumed anyway, male. They always referred to him as a he. But going on, we have anti-feminism. Here is dun dun dun. Manosphere ideologies are predicated on male supremacy, which makes feminism their arch nemesis. This makes us sound like a comic book.
Seriously.
That would insinuate that feminism is female supremacy. Nah, that would never happen. Heavens to Betsy, no.
Do we get to make costumes? I don't really look good in tights, though. I don't know if I want to do that. Can my costume just be cargo pants because I like having pockets? Yes. There we go. Cargo pants and a baggy T-shirt. I am the anti-feminist. Frequent points of attack are gender equality, women's refusal of traditional gender roles like caregiving and homemaking, and the insistence on sexual and reproductive autonomy. Autonomy, guys. So women don't understand the formula for autonomy. And I say this as a woman because I learned it later in life than I would have if I had grown up as a boy instead of growing up as a girl. And that was with my dad making far more effort than I think most people make with girls to get that across. Right? Autonomy isn't just having the right and the power to make your own decisions. Right? It is having the responsibility to consider and be mindful of the impact of those decisions and being culpable for the outcome of those decisions, even when it is bad. It isn't just having the right to hit the tetherball in the backyard. It is being responsible for looking around to make sure that nobody is standing on the other side of the pole waiting to get hit in the head by the ball that you just hit. Right? That's autonomy. It means the control over yourself, and it comes with responsibility to exercise that control with personal accountability. The buck stops with you. That's autonomy. So when feminists talk about autonomy, they are only talking about the rights. They are not talking about the responsibilities that go along with it. And I don't know if it's purely intellectual or partly biological. Purely intellectual would be the culture influencing women to the degree that even the best of dads is only going to get them so far. And if they do not on their own strive for true autonomy and not just feminist, quote, scare quotes, autonomy, they're going to go similarly as I did through a period of not getting it before they get it. And so, like, if you're raising girls, like, I always say my mom worked on this with me too. It's important to get them to understand that when they are deciding on a course of action, their obligation is to consider not just how it's going to affect them, but how it's going to affect the people around them. My story on that with my mom is we had a walnut tree in the backyard. Walnut trees, this is black walnuts. They're basically the weeds of trees. Like, lots of different trees will grow, over large areas from having their seeds scattered around by the wind or by animals and stuff. But walnut trees seem to be, at least black walnut trees, seem to be better at it than a lot of other trees. And if you're in an area where there are squirrels, their seeds get buried because they have, inside the hull that's the size of a baseball, there is an actual nut. And if you don't harvest them yourself, the squirrels will, and they will bury them all over your yard, and then you end up with little walnut tree sprouts. And they make the ground around them acidic, so a lot of other things can't grow in that ground. And we had one in the backyard that, because of where it was, it didn't get as big as it could have gotten. So the branches weren't very thick. And even though it's a hardwood, if the branches aren't, very thick, like we're talking less than 2-inch diameter branches, a lot of the branches, you're still going to break it if you weigh very much, right? And I was a prolific tree climber. The tree didn't even have to have lower branches for me to get up it. The black walnut tree bark the ridges on it are real thick, and they have grooves in them that are thick enough, wide enough, deep enough for a little kid's fingers to get in. And you can get finger holds and toe holds and climb that very easily. And I had to be told not to climb that tree, right? Because I was too big, and my weight would break the branches, and I might get up fairly high in the tree and then fall. And that was what my mom was worried about. There were other issues, and I discovered that when I disobeyed her, and I climbed way up high in that tree, and I stepped on a branch that wasn't big enough and broke it, and it fell down, and it had walnuts on it that were ready to drop, and they did. And one of them just bounced at exactly the correct angle off of another branch to go through the bathroom window of the neighbor's house and break it, like completely out. There was not any glass left in the pane. It was terrible. And, my mom heard that. She's in the kitchen. She looks out the window, sees me up in the tree, knew exactly what happened. You could see from the look on my face, I knew I was busted, right? And, I'm like hurriedly climbing down, and I get down there, and she comes outside. She's like, what were you doing? And, made me admit it. I was up in the walnut tree. Are you supposed to be in the walnut tree? No. It was not. I didn't get a lecture. I was dragged, kicking and screaming internally, through the logic of this outcome is your fault. You did what you were told not to do. You didn't consider the possible outcomes, and here's the result. And of course, Mr. Lehman came out of his house and sees me looking like I'm like this little Ramona Quimby looking little girl. And he tried to be conciliatory because he adored all the kids in the neighborhood. And my mom was like, "Oh no, you cannot interfere here." So she came up with the punishment of, in order to hammer home the fact that I was culpable for breaking that window, and that it was my fault. I did injury to the neighbor by violating a rule that was made to prevent me from causing this type of an outcome or from getting hurt or whatever. I had to do extra chores on top of my regular chores every day after school for a period of time until I had earned at the minimum wage, which was much smaller back then, was like $2 and something an hour. I don't think it was a full $3 an hour at that point. It was $3.85 when I was in high school. But in any case, at the minimum wage, to pay the cost of replacing that window. And that was how Mom showed me, the full impact of my actions. And it was similar to what happens in civil court when you do damage to somebody's property and the judge says, well, you have to pay to replace that, right? Only for a little kid, it just seemed like, the world, the end of the world. I'm not going to have any free time for months and months and months. It wasn't quite that long. And it did give me some understanding, And my dad was the same way. When I would get hurt doing stupid shit. And when I say I would get hurt doing stupid shit, I don't mean like stub your toe and you're now it's bleeding because you ripped a toenail. I mean I stuck my foot in hot coals and got 3rd-degree burns because I wanted to see if they were still hot. Like that kind of stupid shit. I reached for a power line at one point because I thought it was a phone line, and it arced and hit me and knocked me out of the tree. My parents didn't know about that one, but there were a lot of things like that. I almost backed off of an 80-foot cliff at Hocking Hills because I was trying to take a picture of the side of the mountain. Like I was that kid. My dad got his arm around my waist after I put my first foot off the edge of the cliff into the air. Mangaka wants to know why I'm still alive. Well, I credit my dad for that one because I would have fallen. Right? There would have been no HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen because there wouldn't have been a Hannah Wallen. I never would have gotten old enough to get married. I think I was 8 years old when I did that one. So, when I got the 3rd-degree burns on my foot, once I got medical treatment and we, had established I'm okay, it hurts, it's gonna hurt for a while, and that really sucks, but I'm not gonna die from this. My lecture was, you're not gonna do that again. What'd you do wrong? You didn't think about what could happen if I do this, right? And every single time when I was, caught almost killing myself by accident doing something stupid, the consideration of what could happen if I do this was communicated back to me again. Very important. And a lot of that came from Dad. A lot of that came from my dad. My mom demonstrated it as well. But Dad was the one that put it into words. If you don't start thinking before you act, you are going to die. Like, most people don't have to be told that as a child. I did. And I was, because I had my dad there. So, mangaka. It's not hit points. He inflated my luck stat. Everybody, gives their dad that little trophy that says best dad ever on Father's Day, and they're all wrong, because I had the best dad. But, and I had the best mom, too. So, it's important. The whole anti-feminism seeks to isolate and contain dissenting women while setting up traditional and anti-modern women as legitimate representatives, blah, blah, blah. There are benefits to traditional gender roles, caregiving, homemaking, and the idea of autonomy. Like I said, women don't understand autonomy because they refuse to accept accountability. And it's one of the reasons why women have been so quick to accept the elimination of dads from the family. And the real reason that feminists hate anti-feminists is because we don't accept that. This anti-feminism seeks to isolate and contain dissenting women while setting up traditional and anti-modern women as legitimate representatives, exclusively deserving of male validation. So, I thought male validation was a bad thing if you're a feminist. Well,
Jesus.
Apparently now it's a commodity. Male validation is a commodity. Is that what I'm seeing here? Because that's what it looks like. Another prominent trend is to undercut the intellectual underpinnings of feminism by claiming to debunk well-established women's issues such as denial of justice for sexual violence survivors, the gender pay gap, negative representation in popular culture, and others.
You know, as if I didn't need another excuse to just completely ignore everything he said. He brings up the fucking pay gap. Shut up, guy.
Oh my God.
The intellectual underpinnings of feminism. Where they at?
I love this. Claiming to debunk. You know, after you know, we investigate, right? We go through and we find out what is the pathway between zero evidence and the claim that this is true. It should take a pathway through evidence and logic and reason. But a lot of times,
there's nothing.
Yeah,
it's just what they're wrong, and you're stupid if you like them.
Yeah, ideological writing, self-citation.
They're well-established women issues, don't you see?
Yes,
they've been well established.
As part of the establishment.
By the establishment, right?
Lots of things have been well established shortly before being debunked.
Jeez, Pete. Yeah, it was once well established that when a woman got upset, it was because her uterus was traveling around in her body. Well established, guys. You can't question it because it's well established. There was a male equivalent to that, but it was. If a guy masturbated, it made him weak. You know, for some reason, that one hasn't entirely been debunked. Like, it's been debunked, but it's still being proliferated, right? People are still saying it. And people are still making money saying it. People are still condemning male masturbation and treating female masturbation like it's a gift sent from God. Kind of funny. So there you go. But yeah, well-established women's issues. The denial of justice for sexual violence survivors. The gender pay gap, which was my introduction to the accountability gap. And negative representation in popular culture. Which, you know, basically is that feminists just don't like the way women are represented in popular culture. Now we get
girl bosses in fucking everything.
Yeah. Now we get to us. Men's rights activism. MRA is to genuine women's struggles what All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter is to the Black Liberation Movement.
I'll give you that. No, I'll give you that. It actually is.
Yeah.
Because it's not just your favorite shit that matters. It's other shit as well. What? You can't say that. Racist and sexism.
Yes, you are infected with isms and phobias. Or what EWS, which I don't know what that is to the reservation policy. But I'm assuming that's in reference to Indian culture, because I think this writer is out of India. It attempts to paint men as...
I need to look this up before we go on.
Okay.
I presume the E is equal. Enduro World Series? No. I can't find anything through Google, which is no surprise.
Okay, so I searched EWS versus reservation policy, and the first article that comes up is why EWS reservation defeats the purpose of reservation. A reservation on the basis of economic disadvantage can only be justified if the provision or policy attempts to eliminate ingrained types of... I'm assuming they're going to have intersectional victim narratives. Extreme white supremacist, says Richard Bier. Yeah, probably.
That's as good a guess as anything I can come up with. That'll do.
Honestly, yeah, I don't know what EWS actually stands for. But, yeah, The Parliament of India enacted the Constitution 103rd Amendment Act 2019, enabling the state to make reservations for economically weaker economically weaker sections, that's what it is, in matters of higher education and public employment on the basis of economic criteria alone. So guessing, because that's English, but it's not English that an American speaks. So I'm assuming that this is shit, I can't think of the government agency.
I would have guessed that.
But it's DEI basically.
I would have guessed that W means women's, just like E means equal. So it's probably equal women's services.
Nope. Economically weaker sections.
Well, same fucking thing, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. But it's the Equal Opportunity Commission basically is what we have in the United States, and the economically weaker sections under Equal Opportunity Commission policy would be based on ethnic background and the historical victimhood that is attributed to all people who are not white, and as if there were never any poor white people, and gender, because apparently being female makes you poor automatically. So that's I'm guessing this is probably complicated by the social system, the caste system, and of course any other type of social divisions, religious beliefs, tribe type beliefs or associations, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's an Equal Opportunity Commission, and they're probably mad because economic disadvantage was added in addition to other considerations. That would be my guess. Anyway, so MRA. It attempts to paint men as victims of power structures and justify the consolidation of male power as self-defense. So the first half of that, we're not describing things in terms of victim and non-victim with regard to power structures. But what would you call it if a system created by the intersection of law, policy, and cultural standards engages in discrimination against a demographic group? Would that be a victim of a power structure? Would you say if the group is systematically discriminated against, if the group is systematically disadvantaged in areas where human needs are considered, or
no, because men have all the power. Yeah. Therefore, they cannot be victims of power structures.
So essentially, feminists use this kind of language to not address things like, if you look at the entire homeless population, and you look at the entire system in place to assist homeless people in finding shelter, gaining food, clothing, getting jobs, maybe getting out of their situation, going to drug rehab, alcohol rehab, and things like that. Women are prioritized when 75% of homeless people are male. And on top of that, women are prioritized to the degree that while 75% of homeless people are male, 95% of unsheltered homeless people are male. And part of it is that women do have a tendency to be more compliant with programs, assistance programs. So if you tell someone, well, you can't stay in the shelter unless you agree to go to alcohol rehab because you're drunk, a woman will agree to go to alcohol rehab before a man will in a lot of instances. And then you also have a woman can be mentally ill and violent and aggressive and still be considered less dangerous than a man who is mentally ill and behaving in an unusual manner that is not violent or aggressive, like talking to himself under his breath constantly. And I've actually witnessed that directly.
Or just crying in a public place.
Yeah.
Other than other than a toilet. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. People will like cross the street to get away from a man who's crying in public. But I have actually seen women who appear to be homeless, publicly selling their wares and actually getting aggressive with people who turn them down or get in their way, and actually doing property damage, get treated with kid gloves by the same people in the same week who called police and had a homeless guy removed from property because the fact that he was talking to himself under his breath consistently for several minutes scared them. Like tearing off the mirror on a truck doesn't scare anybody if a woman does it, but just muttering under your breath is scary when a man does it.
Mm-hmm.
And being unbathed and approaching people to solicit from them and getting very demanding about it is scary only when a man does it, right? When a woman does it, it's deserving of sympathy and compassion. We got to find somebody to help this woman. But yeah. So yeah, but that's not men being victims of a power structure or anything, right? Because they got privilege.
Mm.
Right.
So much fucking Jesus.
Yeah. And consolidating male power. So, for example, MRAs respond to...
Yeah, they're consolidating them out in the street because they're all fucking homeless. Yeah. That's where they're consolidating their power. Fucking assholes.
For example, he says, MRAs respond to legitimate calls for criminalizing marital rape by attempting to foil it with the bogey of false rape or dowry cases, or cynically bringing up cases of men being raped by women while ignoring facts of sexual violence committed by men against other men by police and militaries. Like the guy had to throw everything in there that he possibly could because, reasons. But we have talked about a great deal actually about sexual violence committed against men, both by other men and by women, violence committed by police and militaries toward men, the fact that rape of men is used as a weapon of war in the Congo, for instance, has been quite discussed, and also the dancing boys of Afghanistan, which it's not so much a weapon of war as just a bizarre, by everybody else's standards, and predatory pastime. But in terms of marital rape, the thing that I point out when feminists bring that up to me is they're all worried about exceptions in marital or in rape law for within a marriage, but they have extended rape law to include instances where consent isn't explicit. Right? They've actually worked to make it a crime for a woman to, a guy's crime for a woman to regret their sexual encounter. and then later say, well, he didn't explicitly get my consent, and I didn't mean it when I did all those things with him. And it's one thing to say that it should be a criminal act, regardless of whether you're married or not, when someone violently holds another person down or beats them up in order to dominate them and get what they want from them, whether it's compliance in the kitchen, whether it's, demand a raise from your boss, whether it's give me money for this or that, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, doesn't matter, right? That's fair, as long as it goes both ways. Neither men nor women are allowed to do this to each other. And it's fair to criminalize surreptitiously drugging someone to get what you want. It's fair to criminalize coercive, genuinely coercive, like meaning with threat of violence or threat of making someone homeless, right? Threat of withholding access to one's kids where that threat is credible. Whether the man or the woman does it, those are fair. But rape law also includes sex when you're too drunk to consent, where, or sex when the state would not allow you to consent because you're impaired mentally. So basically, feminist marital rape exception elimination would criminalize old people in nursing homes for continuing to have the same sexual relations they've had throughout their entire marriage after they both start becoming a little senile, right? And it would criminalize couples who are married and who, have some level of standing consent, but have sex on maybe New Year's Eve after they've been drinking at a party and come home and have sex. Like they do all the time when they're sober. And it's a very different thing when someone has a pattern of sexual activity together and they continue that in those circumstances versus hookups at college gatherings where, somebody takes advantage of a person's less sober state, where they can tell that the other individual wouldn't be able to refuse if they wanted to, right? So I don't agree with feminists on just blanket criminalizing the idea. I do agree that rape law shouldn't have a marital exception if rape law was written in a reasonable manner. But if you're going to have a marital exception, the exception to the marital exception needs to allow for people to continue their normal sexual relations in a trusting relationship, regardless of other people's opinion on their mental state, because that's bullshit. Right? I hope there's not an age limit for when you're allowed to continue to love your partner. That would really suck. Sorry, you're over 65. Your marriage is expired now. What, really? And it's one thing to criminalize taking away somebody's ability to refuse when refusal is a possibility and a likelihood. It's another thing when you're accusing someone of contravening someone's right or ability to refuse when actually there was no likelihood of refusal and no likelihood of regret.
I was about to say maybe they'll make it illegal for old men to marry young women, on the grounds that old man is abusing that young woman in some way. But
Nope.
That would take away a young woman's right to marry an old man for whatever reason she might have. So that's never going to happen. Because the overall agenda is for wealth to be redistributed from rich men to less rich women, and that's never going to be made illegal. It's just going to keep happening while we continue calling it men exploiting women, no matter how much it might resemble women exploiting men.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. When you see, it's interesting when you see an older man with a younger woman. The older man is treated as a predator for the younger woman's naivety. But when you see an older woman with a younger man, the younger man is treated as a predator for the older woman's senility. Right? The men can do no right, and the women can do no wrong. As for the bogey of false rape, India, I will remind you, has a false rape allegation rate that is confirmed to be at least as high as 65% of rape allegations, and could be as high as 85%.
Astounding.
Yeah, so a maximum of 1 in 4 rape allegations might be valid, and it may be as low as it may be confirmed to be as low as 15%. So 1.5 in 100. No, 1.5 in 10. Sorry, 1 in 15 in 100. Might be true, right? And the actual study on which that was done in Delhi, which is a huge population center. So it's not exactly, and rape allegations in Delhi aren't as frequent as people would imagine in the West. But the study was done on allegations reported to police in Delhi during a 6-month period, and during just that 6-month period, there were so many false allegations. A lot of the allegations were parents claiming that their daughter was a rape victim because they didn't like the man that she eloped with. And a lot of them were women claiming to have been victims of rape because they had sex with a man and then he didn't marry them.
There's a lot of stereotypes that people will throw out about faraway countries. And you hear this from a lot of grossly uneducated Westerners talking about India, saying, India is such a misogynist country. They hate women over there because they think it's just like any other Muslim country. And let's not get into the discussion of how Muslim countries are misogynist. That's not necessarily true either. But India is not to be included in such things. That yes, there are Muslims in India, but it's mostly a Hindu nation with this whole other different set of paradigms, and almost none of these, frankly, xenophobic stereotypes are true about any given country. But the stereotype that is generally true is cities tend to be more left-wing than the country in almost any country you could possibly name. It's because when people conglomerate into large populations, the value of human life lowers, and the first lives to have their value lowered are men. Because to some degree that appears... sorry, Peter Wright, but it appears to be human nature to divert to gynocentrism whenever there's a density of population.
I do take issue with that, because it's not just Peter. I'm also on board with his observations that this isn't evolutionary. It's not genetic, and it's not a human instinct.
But
That's
generally speaking,
yeah.
wherever there's a population density, that the people of that area are more likely to to uh, to to devalue humans in general, and the people they're more likely to devalue first are the males, and that's why you'll notice, whether it's India or the Middle East or the West or the Far East or whatever, the section of the population they devalue first is males, and that's why you'll find there's this same discrepancy between rural India and urban India, or rural England and urban England. It's always the men they devalue first, and that's why it's always what you see first, and so then even while they're rinsing the men of those areas for everything they're worth, they continue to proclaim these are the areas in which the women are most oppressed. Well, they'll claim, I guess. Well, I guess they'll claim the country, the out in the sticks is the area where women are most oppressed. But meanwhile, they'll put most of their effort into rinsing the men in the urban areas of all and everything they've earned, because they know that they already have that shit in the bag. So they'll look further and further out into the rest of the country to rinse the men of those areas of, and it's always this backward idea of they know that urban areas are the worst possible places to live, in every possible way, except when it comes to these gender issues. They know that crime is higher in urban areas. They know that that debauchery of any kind is higher in urban areas. But when it comes to gender issues, they'll say, "Oh well, all of this stuff is worse except gender issues." It's out in the country where women have worst. So we need to expand. We need to expand these policies we have in urban areas out into the rest of the country, and that's why it keeps happening. And that's I don't know where to take it from there, but that seems to be the case.
A lot of it comes from a degree of dysfunction that has occurred. Like if you look at the manifestation of gynocentrism, where the concept of gynocentrism is a dominant focus on women's interests, right? Women's welfare. If you look at historical, and prehistorical context, you're going to see more of a focus on preserving reproductive capacity and preserving fertility, not preserving women for the sake of being women, not protecting women for the sake of protecting women. It's for the sake of protecting children, for the sake of family cohesion, for the sake of maintaining the safe haven for the family, like the home as a safe place in general, and not so much that being female automatically makes someone more valuable as a human being. And as a result of that, you had more functional standards that could be considered gynocentric. That if a woman is pregnant, there may be some reasons to create exceptions for the expectations that are normally imposed on adults in terms of resource gathering, maintenance, usage, transportation, storage, and all that. Even in tribal situations, even in a context of like prehistoric tribal situations where the women of those tribes were physically stronger than rowers are today, male rowers are today, where the women of those tribes had a thicker bone structure than modern men do. And because you still have vulnerability during pregnancy, and when the child is very young, then yeah, you get some lenience, right? But today we have this situation of law and policy that, to no one's actual welfare advantage, no one's actual improvement of their well-being, we have this dominant focus on women's interests as described by women's political advocates who are self-appointed and who grift on the concept of advocating for women. And so we've lost the concept of accountability where women are concerned. Women are not facing the same level of expectation that women once faced. Women have become increasingly neotenous over time, both in terms of their physical appearance and their behavior. And it creates the impression that it's just natural to treat women this way and to expect women to be somehow less adult than men in everything about them. But if that was the case, it would have always been that way. It wouldn't have evolved over time, or devolved, in my opinion, over time to this sniveling, wimpy, thoughtless, solipsistic, whiny set of assholes that you see in the majority of modern women. And I mean, even women 100 years ago were stronger of character and less gynocentric than they are today. Like, there was some accountability for falsely accusing someone. There was some accountability for just being dishonest, being a drain on your community, being a shrew, even if it wasn't to the degree of like prehistory, right? Like, we're talking a huge change over time, and it's one that I think is cultural. And the shift, the catalyst, the fulcrum of the shift was the switch from perceived gynocentrism that was really about protecting and preserving families, protecting and preserving children's welfare, and keeping the home as a safe haven, to somehow women just automatically being more important than men, more valued than men, because they're women. Like, that's unnatural. There's not a cause for that. There's not a evolutionary advantage to that. It's just prejudice. So, but
if we go fast
no,
enough,
Nick
can we
Manley, you're
finish
not
this
the only
article?
guy here. Huh?
If we go fast enough, can we finish this article in one stream?
We might be able to. How much is left here? No. I think what we'll do is the next one is homophobia and transphobia. So I don't want to even get into that discussion. It's 9:22. I don't want to get into that discussion until the start of the next show. We will maybe recap and do a little bit more discussion about men's rights activism per se, because that's us specifically. But in terms of gynocentrism, I guess my final word on that is I think what people are thinking of as natural gynocentrism is a misnomer. And what actually is gynocentrism, like strictly focusing on women's interests and welfare because they're women and not for any other reason, like that's not natural. And we could overcome it, but it's going to take a lot of growing pains. But anyway, I'm going to get into our super chows. Not our super chows. Yeah, our super chows. Okay. And then I will go to the super chats, and I don't know if I think we have we do have one Rumble rant as well. So, but our super chows start, let's see, with Meredith G, who gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 294, honey for the badgers. And then Richard Beer gave us $5 and said, who are we? We are the chaff to divert attention away from the real puppet masters pulling the strings, the catriarchy. Oh yeah. That's the other part of my YouTube feed. My YouTube feed is really weird. You'll see some creepypasta reader's story with a terrifying looking title, and like right next to it is this pet groomer channel called the Girl with the Dogs, because there's cute puppies and cats and stuff that are on that, and they behave very badly. Their animals don't do well with having somebody give them a shower and a blow dry and combing their hair. And some of them are just, they're not traumatized, they just object and until they get to the point where they're actually clean and combed and happy and they get treats and stuff. So very odd.
Puppies and kittens are only cute as long as they have dry, fluffy hair. You ever seen a wet cat?
Oh my God, yes.
It's almost as bad as seeing a shaved cat. It's not a cat. It's a fucking demon from hell.
It's cute when you give kittens their first little bath. That's cute. That's adorable.
I had a lady give me a kitten when I lived up north of where I am now, and the kitten was too young to be taken away from its mother, and I didn't realize it until I got home with her and she couldn't eat, and I had to go out and get kitten formula, and I almost took her back, and then I thought, you know what, that lady's just gonna give this kitten to somebody else, and they might not know what to do, because you can't just like feed your kitten and go to bed for 8 hours. That cat has to eat every hour. So I spent a couple of days bottle feeding this kitten and weaning this kitten. I say a couple of days, I mean in like a week. Weaning this kitten from kitten formula to formula-soaked kitten chow, and then eventually gave the kitten, kitten food, which is differently formulated than adult cat food, and so on. And so this kitten didn't learn everything that cats usually learn from their mothers. And I thought the bathing instinct was just an instinct, like that they just knew that. Nope. She smelled so bad after a few days, like you would not believe. Well, we had another cat in the house at that time, a rescue. Some asshole had declawed this cat and then dumped it in, just out in the city. And so he was found by the guy that I was living with at the time. He was found and by him and taken in, and he took care of him. And he wasn't fully grown either until at the time that he was found. Like, people are assholes to animals, I swear. So this cat had no front claws. He was pretty well defenseless, but he was bigger and stronger than the kitten, and he decided the kitten stank, and he chased her down and pinned her and bathed her, and then he had to sit on her to hold her still. So he bathed her face and her head, and then he turned around and sat on her head and bathed the rest of her, and wouldn't let me near. He did still have teeth. And so finally, he gets up off of her head and he sniffs her over, and he gets to her head and he gets this expression on his face like, "You smell like ass." So he bathes her head again. And just from that, like, she looked like a drowned rat. But now she smelled like dirty kitten and cat spit. So I went to give her a bath in the kitchen or the bathroom sink, and I drew the water, and I made sure it was slightly warmer than, what I would do for a human, because cats have a higher temperature, but not Bernie warm. Like, I could put my hands in it and it was all right. I go to bathe the cat in it, and she panicked and ran up my sleeve.
Ooh.
Next thing that happens is she gets caught in between my t-shirt and my turtleneck, and both of which were tucked into my pants, and just did laps around my midsection. So by the time I get the cat out of my shirt and get her calmed down and get myself calmed down and everything, I looked like I had been flaying myself for religious purposes. Like, it was bad. I had scratches up and down my back. I had scratches all on my sides. They went all the way around my middle. It just looked like I had been, self-abusing for, the suffering, that you do if you're trying to get closer to God through suffering. Never tried to bathe her again after that.
It's weird how people find kittens and puppies cute, but if they have no hair, they're a lot less cute. Whereas people find human babies cute, but if those human babies are covered in hair, then they look like fucking werewolves and they're less cute. Like, I can't find the consistency in this. Oh, that thing's cute. Position. The only consistency is my position, where none of these things are cute. Fuck all of them. Fucking burn them in a fire.
Personally, I think there's no such thing as an ugly baby. I've not run in. People have sent me pictures to prove me wrong, and I'm like, oh, it's a baby. So yeah, to me, there's no such thing as an ugly baby. Maybe a baby shark. No, I've seen baby sharks. They're not scary like full-sized sharks are. Anyway. So Richard also gave us $5 and said, doesn't attempting to change reality by way of definition require that the new definition be incanted in Latin? And doesn't trying to change gravity require the straddling of a broom? Something along those lines. Trying to challenge gravity requires physics. You have to understand what to burn and how to position the part of the machine that the flaming hot air is going to shoot out of. And don't stand behind that, because it sucks. But let's see, we also had a Rumble rant from NobaFan21. Does the author realize that there's a trend of women being picky, and many of them choose the bad boys that have toxic and very masculine traits, or does the author just blame capitalism for it? Oh, I've been told that's a false stereotype of women. I don't understand women. But the guy that told me that does. Just let that sink in for a minute.
Right, the zinc is in.
Yeah, the zinc is in. Albert Nader Retro gave us $5. Canadian and said World War I went from 28 July 1914 to 11 November. The U.S. declared war on 1918 December 7, 1917. I think there was some copy pasting done here. I think you're saying November 11, 1918, and the U.S. declared war on December 7, 1917. You maybe had men in action for 6 to 8 months after training. Yes, but a lot of them still ended up dead. The amount of time they spent in action versus what the implications were afterward really doesn't matter if they came in and instantly ended the war in 3 days. It's the outcome, not the course of action that, like men in the United States essentially were scooped up, and men were drafted in the United States quite a while before war was declared. They knew they were going to declare war before the events that were used as excuses to get involved in the war. They were already drafting men in preparation and looking for an excuse. And then, so from the time the U.S. declared war, they already had sent men over. They were already sending men over, and that's been a pattern throughout the entire 20th century and part of the 21st century so far. Albert Nader Retro gave us another $5 Canadian and said that's supposed to be November 11, 2018. Yep, that's okay. German was threatening an alliance with Mexico to invade, as I've read. At that time, that was a threat. I would say not sufficient to go attack Germany. Like, the solution to a threat coming from our southern border is really simple. Like, if they had taken seriously a threat that we were going to get invaded by Mexico during World War I, all they would have had to do was man the border between the United States and Mexico, and they would have been able to repel any invasion. And I don't even think it's arguable that that Mexico would have been able to hit us at sea significantly, or by air. And I don't think that Germany would have been able to do it either. Like, we were not under a threat that merited sending troops overseas at all.
I mean, anyone who feels like comparing the Ukraine war with that war, take a look.
Yeah, because this is it's they've got a formula. Our political factions have a formula, right? That they ramp up these perceived threats. They engage in honestly, like, a pro wrestler-esque monologues at each other. Like, it's almost like going back to the 80s and watching it when it was the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF, and not World Wrestling Entertainment, after the one environmentalist group sued them, and watching them monologue at each other about how they're going to destroy each other and how each other are the bad guy, even though there's an obvious good guy and an obvious bad guy in the wrestling situation. But then you get no diplomacy out of that, right? Because the politicians are ranting at each other and threatening each other. And the next thing you know, somebody is investing in another corporation that makes weapons of war or performs services for the military, and they're voting to send our troops over to some foreign country to get killed fighting over some concept that doesn't necessarily translate into threats to the United States at all and interfere in some other country's political conflicts. So, but yeah, in terms of World War I, no, if there was a threat from Mexico, the solution would have been to man the border between the United States and Mexico to patrol the waters around the United States so that we couldn't get attacked by Mexico. Like, that's simple enough, isn't it? There weren't even nuclear bombs. There weren't even long-range missiles that could even remotely threaten us. A lot of the technology of war that exists today was invented to fight the world wars that the United States involved itself in. The Cold War wouldn't have happened if we had not entered World War I.
Of course, once we developed air-based war, and war that was mitigated by having nukes and stuff, well, we'll never have the same kind of war ever again. But now we can have millions upon millions of fighting-age men crossing the border facilitated by the regime in charge. And now people are like, well, they're not invaders, they're immigrants.
Yeah.
I know they look like invaders, but we don't call them invaders. We call them immigrants. So we can't invoke that rule we have about what we do when there's an invasion at the southern border, because we don't call them invaders. We call them immigrants. And you can't just invoke that law just because you call them invaders, because we don't call them invaders. We call them immigrants.
And by the way, the federal government will go to war with your state if you try to do it yourself instead of relying on us to not do it. But yeah, I like. God bless Texas. That I wish that the rest of the states, the United States, had balls half the size of Texas.
A lot of them do. Many red states
Actually,
joined in with the fight.
A lot of them, a lot of the governors at least signed in support of Texas. I was glad to see that.
And yeah, I'm going to do the Doomer thing and say, yeah, this might be yet another psyop where they're just waiting to get as much footage as they can.
Oh yeah,
and that they can, restrict to just the footage they want, so that they can say, look, Texas and all these red states are defying federal rules. This is an insurrection. Yeah, it could very well be another J6 style. PSYOP. A PSYOP that involves ground troops. That's going to be I don't even know the extremities to which I can describe how this is possibly a trap, a tarp into which you're all falling. So yeah, I'm gonna predict the worst and then say I told you so.
Best.
But say I told you so when the worst possible thing happens. But be prepared for the worst possible thing happening.
I expect the Biden administration to wag the dog here. Honestly,
I don't know about. Don't forget the Biden regime has all of the mainstream media outlets in the palm of their hand, and they're going to push everything they can through those outlets.
Yeah, that's basically what that was. A conspiracy among all of the major news outlets to promote the idea of a war that wasn't really happening in some foreign area. And if I remember right, in the movie, it was so bad that they made a place up for the war to be happening in, because people were just so ignorant that they didn't realize it. Obviously they're not going to make up a location in Texas, but I do expect, and they don't even need to hire actors to do it now, because they can actually deepfake it if they want to, and they don't have to have, like, the whole idea of crisis actors can just go by the wayside. But yeah, I do expect a lot of fakery in response to the situation.
And yeah, they're probably going to use it to say we shouldn't have an election this year because there's such an emergency at the southern border.
Well, that's exactly the same thing that the Democrats predicted Trump would do. It might that be projection on their part if that happens?
And when it does,
they accuse their enemy of doing what they themselves intend to do. I don't know if the states would allow that. I don't know how much of the U.S. military has been compromised by the woke mind virus. I don't, what might happen. It could be anything from a completely, not with a bang but a whimper, peaceful, quote unquote peaceful, like no physical fighting per se, takeover, or this could end up being like a civil war. Like, it would be really difficult to predict that nobody is going to fight back. There are too many people online sounding off about it. And whatever happens, if you're going to predict all that, my prediction is that a lot of men are going to get themselves killed trying to stop it, and a lot of men are going to get themselves killed trying to enforce it. And, both sides will point the finger at each other as the reason why they all died. And then we'll talk about the 2 to 10% of deaths that were women, like they're the only ones that mattered. Not us, but society. But in the meantime, I guess we'll have to just watch. They may just, there's the possibility that they own the election system and they don't have to do that. There's also the possibility that they realize they've stretched their hand a little too far, bitten off a little more than they can chew in terms of fooling people, and they'll allow, the election to be fair for once. But there's also the possibility of having a 75-degree day in the middle of December due to bizarre circumstances happening. Very rare thing. Once in a while it happens. But it's not something that you would ever want to count on. Richard Beer gave us $5 super chow. It said, it is only being seen as a problem because the migrants are now competing for the entitlement gibs with those who believe that such gibs are their ergo given right. That's a good inside joke. I have seen articles to that effect a few decades ago, too. The wag the dog scenario was created to cover up a sexual scandal in the executive branch. Well, that's because there had been one recently. There's always a sexual scandal in the D.C. Like, holy shit, we learned in, I think, 2016, the current year plus one, that the United States Capitol, the United States federal government, had a slush fund to pay off employees in the Capitol building who were alleging sexual misconduct by our legislators. Like, literally had a cover-up slush fund for sexual misconduct in Washington. And nobody batted an eye because there was so much other stuff going on.
Yeah. So disgusting. It shouldn't be surprising, and it's really kind of not.
Yeah, everybody wants the Epstein list. As far as the Epstein client list goes, it's not that I don't want to know, but fuck, I want the list of the people who used that slush fund to cover their asses after sexually harassing or otherwise engaging in sexual misconduct with employees in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I want the CIA to admit that they killed John Kennedy so that they can be held accountable. Oh, wait, they already did, and they have...
Yeah, accountability? No. They don't have that. Washington is allergic to accountability. But that is all the super chats. That is all the super chows. That is the wrong window. Damn it. Okay, that is all the Rumble rants. Nope, there is one more. Occupation 42 gave us $20 and said, no comment, just feeding the badger. Thank you for the Rumble rant and the $20. And thank everyone who commented and sent us funds. Also, thanks to everyone for listening. This is a weird sausage, and I honestly wasn't sure if this article would be fodder for a whole show, and it's actually going to be for, it's going to take us at least 2 to get through it. So thanks to my 2 co-hosts also for sticking out the long sausage. And thanks to everybody who works in the background, make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines. dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.